Now, let's hear from the late, great Bobby Short for a minute, shall we? Let's get right into this. She's another one titled here, U.S. Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Training Center, Mono County, Bridgeport, California. Butch Young was very young at 19 years old when he was sent to the Marine Warfare Training Center, MWTC, near Mono Lake, located in California's desolate Sierra Nevada mountain range. It's one of the Marine Corps' most remote and isolated posts. The center was established during the 1950s as the Cold Weather Battalion, with the mission of providing cold weather training for replacement personnel bound for Korea during that conflict. Young was sent to an area called Pickle Meadows, south of the lake, there to learn how to fight, how to conduct himself in combat, how to survive, engage and meet the enemy head-on in freezing, snowy wilderness conditions. Young thought he was prepared for the wilderness training. Mono Lake is extremely remote, and the setting is one of dense forests. One cold, freezing night, Young and his squad were on patrol during a nighttime war game. It was cold, deep snow on the ground at an elevation of 8,000 feet. The moon was out, and you could see quite clearly. It was almost like daylight with the moon and starlight reflecting off the snow. Then it happened quickly and suddenly. The men spotted what they thought were the opposing squad members advancing off to the right. Young could see two looming figures. One of them was crouched, the other was standing upright, but the dark figures did not act like Marines on maneuvers. How they acted defied any action of a trained Marine in the woods. In fact, the dark figures were not trying to avoid and conceal themselves. The behavior of the two didn't make sense to Young. Confused, the squad strained to get a better look. They could see no weapons, no clothing, or anything that would indicate what Marines wear on maneuvers. The moon lit them up just enough to see fingers on their hands some 30 yards away. Young figured that it had to have been a pretty big hand to distinguish fingers that far away. It took a while before the Marines realized what they had seen. The next morning, the squad learned that the opposing squad team they were hunting was actually 2 clicks away. They weren't even in the neighborhood. So, then what was it the squad encountered? Young wondered what they had seen so high up in the timberline. Finally, they began to realize that they all had encountered 2 Bigfoot watching them advance up the hill that night. There you go. I wonder how many of these people in the armed forces, especially that did all the maneuvers on the home bases, I wonder how many of them are sitting here watching this channel. I wonder. I have a feeling there's a lot, more than we may guess. Let's read one more from the late, great Bobby Short, shall we? I always enjoy sharing Bobby Short's voice because of so many of those evil people who try to suppress her voice. Aberdeen, Proving Grounds, Maryland. Mark Opsasnick, O-P-S-A-S-N-I-C-K, author of Maryland Bigfoot Digest, wrote about the Harewood Park Monster in 1976. Over time, research has amassed a string of sightings in that region. Briefly, one story was about 3 boys, ages 16 to 17. 3 boys, ages 16 to 17, who testified that they saw a bad-smelling, hair-covered, 8-foot-tall Bigfoot 3 consecutive nights near Harewood Park in Baltimore County, Maryland. It was initially investigated and written up by S. Stover and Bernard Brown in the Info Journal, Volume 7, Number 6, page 4. Then, in May of 76, the Richard Stewart family saw what was called the Harewood Park Monster while they were clearing brush. It was reported in the News American on May 27, 76. To my knowledge, nothing much has been written about the Harewood Park Monster since the 70s, until 2010, when somebody wrote me through the website. In that email, the writer suggested the missing people in that region could be attributed to what once were several Bigfoot-like creatures being held at a U.S. Army facility in Aberdeen, Maryland. Whoa. The missing people in that region. Then in 2011, I received another letter, apparently from a different soldier. The fellow was searching for some update on other information on the Harewood Park Monster. Unfortunately, I didn't have the answers the man was looking for, but I discovered with the help of Maryland residents Chuck Prowl and Jay Jackson that Harewood Park sits across the bay from Aberdeen Proving Grounds. The Aberdeen Proving Ground is a United States Army facility located in Hartford County, Maryland. It is a secretive test, evaluation, research, and development engineering installation, long considered the best of its kind in the world. Jay Jackson, a chemical engineer in civilian life for Kodak, had been stationed there at one time. How is this related to Bigfoot or the Harewood Park Monster? The informant said he was at one time part of the security detail at Aberdeen and was friends with a cook on the base. He and the cook often drank together off duty. During one of those drinking sessions, the cook told him what the off-limits area of the base had living there. Here we go. Excuse me. 20 years ago, I was a snot-nosed kid, and the monsters were things, I couldn't imagine. In the letter, he asked, is it possible the Harewood Park Monster is something that escaped from Aberdeen Proving Grounds? I'm not military, so I was unsure about any of this. All I can publish is what has been written to me. Continuing on, the informant stated, quote, I met another security guard that worked there at the APG, Aberdeen Proving Grounds, who said they have something like a Bigfoot living there. Reference to the Harewood Monster, the guard said. Nothing else is ever heard of the Bigfoot escapee after the military swept the woods. At least we never heard anything. The informant believed a Bigfoot could have followed the railroad tracks and by traveling further west could have survived by eating out of dumpsters and dog food dishes, that sort of thing. There are one or two instances where Bigfoot have been observed eating from dumpsters and not necessarily near military facilities. Texas, Oklahoma, Washington State, Alaska, Alabama, and California, as well as Canada, all have reports of Bigfoot pillaging dumpsters, also known as dumpster diving. A week later, I discovered Harewood Park is a community next to the railroad tracks in Baltimore County, across the river from Hartford County, Maryland. It's only about 5 miles to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, where the creature was thought to be housed and held in a barred, secure, cage-like enclosure. After it escaped, bracket, a soldier's theory, end bracket, it is quite possible that the Sasquatch traveled several more miles following the railroad tracks where it was reportedly seen eating from dumpsters at a grocery store. I waited for more information from the security guard at the APG, but it never came. Figuring he used a fictitious name, I forgot about the entry. Still, I had the feeling there might be more to the story than I knew. I discussed the case with Chuck Prawl because of his familiarity with that region in Maryland. He postulated the Sasquatch could swim across the bay and may not have taken the railroad tracks at all. The Sasquatch is reportedly a great swimmer, and for me, this story was hard to imagine. I can report what comes to me, but I know little about the core of military operations or the secrecy therein. If there is more to the story, I'd like to hear it. Me too. I have heard a handful of people with credentials with their name have assured me that there has been noted live captures and as well as 5. I think there was 5 dead bodies in the possession and a live capture. And there was a very allegedly authentic whistleblower, elderly scientist who was a whistleblower on that information. Go one more. McCready Training Center, National Guard sighting. Captain E.N. Scarn, S-C-A-R-N-G, R.T. Cumby, described a dark, hairy figure that was between 4 and 6 feet tall that sprang out onto the road, landing on all fours, and then ran upright on 2 legs into the woods near McCready National Guard Training Center in Eastover, Elkin County, South Carolina. Cumby filed the incident with me in November of 2011, telling me 4 of his buddies saw it at the same time he did, and all of them freaked out at the sight. It happened in broad daylight in 2009 during a training exercise. According to Cumby, later that day they stopped into the facility's environmental office to ask about wildlife sightings. They told him nothing usual had been reported. Several days later, while at the training center, others said they had seen it. Food sources are plentiful in that area, and the Congaree National Park river basin and swamps are only a few miles away. 3 weeks after Cumbee's report came in, just after Christmas, a civilian worker at the training center asked for anonymity. Say that 10 times as fast as you can, right? Sent an email through the website indicating that he had seen 2 of the hairy things. They were near McCready National Guard Training Center, once in 2007 and again in 2009. The first time he saw them, he described a female with a smaller one trying to get across Old Eastover Road in broad daylight. The worker exclaimed the traffic was heavy and many people had to have seen the 2 of them, but nobody stopped to let them pass, about the informant. 2 cars behind him skidded to a stop, so he knows at least the occupants of those vehicles saw them too, but apparently never reported the sighting. The second time, a large male was at the back of the training facility late at night. The incident was reported. It just keeps going on and on and on. Man, she did some digging. Here's one more short one, and then that's it, and then I'll get back to hearing from all of you. United States Air Force Academy, Colorado Springs, Colorado. I was a cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, Colorado, back in the summer of '91. I was at the academy for only a few weeks and was finishing up basic training when it happened. The academy itself sits on the foothills of the Colorado Rocky Mountains. Basically, I could step out of the cadet area and I'd be standing in the mountains. There's plenty of bush, trees, and so on to conceal just about anyone or anything you want back there. One night about 9 p.m., my roommate and I were in our beds chatting about our upcoming campout in Jacks Valley. It's an area beside the Air Force Academy where we did a lot of field training. Suddenly we heard what sounded like a woman screaming her head off. It was horrific to hear. We could also hear other cadets in their rooms talking and joking around before the blood-curdling scream. The campus was basically shut down for the night and everyone was getting ready for the next day. I remember the ambient noise being rather loud. Then this scream came. All of a sudden, you could have heard a pin drop. It was so quiet. I turned and asked my roommate if he heard what I and everyone else just heard, and he looked at me and says, "Oh yeah." He says, "Oh yeah. That's the local Bigfoot." I couldn't believe it, of course, but of course I heard it. My roomie told me about a buddy of his who saw a big hairy human looming thing drinking at a local lake. When the Bigfoot saw his friend watching, thing stood up, turned away, and walked into the forest. Of course, the next week in Jacks Valley, for me, was a very nervous situation. I was more worried about getting up at night and walking to the latrine by myself than I was running the assault course. There were a few cadets that year that didn't know about the AFA's local Bigfoot. ELP Zumi, June 4th, 99. There you go. There's a couple in here. Just a couple.